Hello everyone, and we are live. Welcome to another episode of ProDJ Live. Today we have a brand new topic for you guys. Hope you're excited for it. We're going to talk about build-ups, breakdowns, and drops. Okay, so as I've promised from the beginning of the series, we're going to be exploring this in a completely different genre. So I might have gone into something a little bit challenging for me, but I wanted to challenge myself. I think it's always good as a producer to do that every now and again, to venture into a new style and see how you get on with it, and just think essentially about the principles that relate to something which I've probably have discussed already over the course of these episodes, which is the idea of tension and release, which I think it's something which is common to every genre that I can think of, essentially from ranging from classical all the way to, you know, to techno or electronic music. It's all based around giving something, taking away, in managing expectations in a way. So we're going to see how that translates into certain techniques which you can apply to any genre. So today I went a little bit hard. So let's see what I have for you guys today. So today we're going to have something which is already prepared. We're going to essentially break down, look at some of the options that I have decided to choose, and maybe even finesse certain things, try and tweak to maximize the idea of having something coming in really hard or breaking down and essentially guiding us through the emotions of a track. So, and this is a particularly challenging track because there's not, many changes as far as like chord progressions as we've seen in other cases. So this is something quite unique, but in a way very common to a lot of electronic music genres. So let's dive right in. Let's go into Ableton now. Here we are. So you guys tell me, it would be great to hear in the chat, first and foremost, if everything is good as far as as the audio is concerned, and the video, the streaming quality. If there's anything, just let us know in the comments. We want to make sure that we have the best possible stream for you guys. But also, I would like for you guys, because I wouldn't call myself an expert, so if you can pinpoint what style this is, we're definitely working at in like a techno sort of realm. Kind of very hard-hitting, very rumbly. So yeah, worlds apart from what we had last week. Let's have a quick listen to this. And I'm going to maybe not have a listen all the way through. We're going to just maybe go until the first drop, which is located around here. And then I'm going to stop and go kind of through a journey of looking at some of the options that were taken. And again, I've decided to sort of build upon something that we've explored over the past 2 weeks, which was looking at how we can get more life out of loops. So I've essentially started composing this with some loops from a sample pack, from a techno sample pack, and then I've essentially worked around, as you can see here, a lot of things are grayed out, so there was a lot of muting of things, but there's a lot more processing going on. If you look here at the a lot of these tracks have a lot of processing, creative processing, to give more life to these sounds. So yeah, without further ado, let me just fire away, and here goes nothing. Okay, so there you have it. Something completely new today. So let's have a look at some of the things that are the main parts of this track. I guess that obviously being an electronic techno track, then you got to have a 4 on the floor kick. In this case, a very specific rumbly kick. So this is what's giving us, sort of like what's grounding us to the beat, right? So this is where everything is sort of gravitating around. And I think obviously we have something which is giving us a more tonal feel as well, which are these two loops here also. So there was already a lot of processing going on here on the originals. There was warping involved. There was there's a sidechain trigger here, which is also kind of making this bounce a little bit. This filter is heavily automated throughout the track. So the first thing that I'm going to, I suppose, highlight is the importance of automation, right? Because as you can see here, just on this filter alone, I have sort of navigated a lot. And you can see by the sort of not very perfect shape of this, that this was all done manually. And what I mean by that is, this is one of the things that I like to do a lot, which is some of the automation that you can do. You can really just write in your automation, right? You can just bring the pencil tool and do it this way around, or you can just kind of let's just do this on a different track, right? Depending on what kind of parameter you're automating, you know, we might need to do it like so. But in this case, I guess that I would get a more sort of natural feel in a way. I would get maybe something which is, I would assume, kind of like going with the emotion, whether taking away the top end, which is essentially what I'm writing here, right? If you look here, what I'm doing is reintroducing the top end at certain parts and making this a little bit duller. So essentially we're always constantly having this background loop, right? So this is constantly throughout the whole track. But the feeling of proximity that this gives, or of depth, of things being further away from us, is heavily influenced by this. And not only that, there's a lot of other parameters that have been automated. One of the other things here is the percentage of reverb. So this is one of the reverbs that is present in this sound. So as you can see here, for instance, and I've also done this manually. So I essentially hit play and I just wrote this automation. So see what happens here is that actually there's a combination of two things being automated. So it's the percentage of wet signal, so the amount of reverb on this sound, and also the filter. So these are two things that I've heavily automated throughout the track to play around with the sense of things being closer to us, further away, so we're not bored by them, but also these two main motifs, the kick and this loop, is kind of what's grounding us to the track, what's kind of giving us the vibe, the atmosphere. So it's a very important thing to have. But it would be boring to just like copy paste, loop around endlessly. That would just make it possibly not very interesting. So this way, we've managed to keep the same thing for almost 4 minutes and 20 seconds, which is quite a bit. But yeah, so that's the first principle for these two main elements. But then two other things here. I guess this is also another case where, yeah, I've automated a little bit of the filter here. And by doing this, by having this sort of ramp up gradually here on this intro, right? So we first introduce these two elements. So that's setting the mood. And from this moment on that we introduce the kick, the kick is there. So we have a sense of pulse, but then we don't have necessarily, so it's grounding us rhythmically, but we're not introducing the full scope of the kick, right? We're leaving a little bit of the top end, but rolling off most of the low end. So doing breaks, there's two things which are techniques that work, as I said, on a variety of genres. Here, the main thing is just we're doing a little stop as a 1 bar stop here on the kick, right? And when the kick comes back in, we are bringing in a lot more low end, but not the full spectrum yet, right? As you can see here, the filter is giving us more and more low end. And then here the snares, right? So we're just introducing some sparse snares to give us the sense of the backbeat, but not yet fully disclosing the snare pattern yet, right? We're essentially telling the audience, so here's one thing that you're going to hear with a bit more rhythm further on, but for now, here's just a little snippet of that. And again, here, same technique. There's a stop on the kick, but here we did 2 bars rather than 1. And we still have a sense of rhythm because the one of these synths so it's very pulsating. I think it's mostly this was what's being responsible for that. This. And funnily enough, so I've renamed this, but this is a trick that I've learned watching Guy from Disclosure using this, and he was using essentially an auto pan as a tremolo, which in its own right can be treated as a sort of like a wave shaper, if you follow my drift. So let me just recreate that because I think this is an interesting technique for all you Ableton users that might not have what's the plugin called? Kickstart? I don't own it, so I don't know, because I've always come up with ways of doing the pumping effects through other methods. So essentially what I did here, just to recreate this very quickly, because I think this is worth noticing, which is essentially, so if you're using an auto pan, so by default we have the 2 phases between left and right channels in opposition, right? So essentially we get this sort of motion, right, which is going left to right. And we can lock this in with a BPM. So if we do quarter notes, it's doing that. But if we set the phase to be exactly the same, so there's no difference between left and right. So there you go. And now we can adjust the shape of this modulation. And then we can, if we want more of this effect or less of that effect, we can control with the amount, right? As you can see, this is, I think it's a very clever technique, and you can try different shapes if you want. You can adjust the shape. So pretty cool technique, and you can always rename your plugins when they're native plugins in Ableton. So yeah, I just wanted to give you this tip, which I think is pretty cool. However, I think there's also the amount of this has been modulated throughout. Let me see. Sorry, wrong channel. This is the right one. This is the right one. Yeah, there we go. So this has been also automated. As you can see, the amount here. This I've written in. Right, so this is also changes throughout the track. Sometimes I want it to be stabler, sometimes I wanted it to have that sort of pumping feel, and that also adds to the sense of things being developed. So it's the same sound. As you can see, this is getting gradually pumpier, right? Okay, cool. And then I also have another thing which I did here for the snare, which is a very popular technique to help with a transition. So I'm going to also recreate what I did here. So this is our standard snare. So I just grabbed the snare and placed it on the 4 beat. So if you count the last beat, the last bar, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you accent the 4, that helps with what that is doing is kind of telling or announcing that something's going to go down, right? So that's something that's going to drop. So it's still not the drop, but as we're building up the tension to get to that drop part, we can do that by just, one thing will be just having the snare there, right? So that would be one way. But to help with that, I've duplicated this track and the clip, and then I've reversed the clip. So you kind of have a reverse clap going into. Nothing new there. It's a very popular thing, very common thing to do in a lot of genres, but it sure helps with sort of like having this whooshy sound that again announces that something's going to happen. And I think we can even sort of make this a bit more, I guess, more dramatic, because we also have a little sort of riser, sort of whooshy sound. So if I have that right before the clap, right, so because you can see that is now that I'm hearing this, I would even do a little stop maybe on these synth sounds here. So that even makes it more dramatic, because we're shifting the attention of what's happening there. So we have that pumping sound going on with the loops and with the synths, but having that little stop on the 4 beat right before the next section kicks in, and having the snare very isolated, helps with creating that tension. Something just like hits you in the face, and then next we're gonna have the kick in full splendor, because we have now the unfiltered version. So the filter goes all the way down, and we have the full low end coming at us. Which is interesting, because it's almost like a drop in a way, but almost like an anti-drop, because what you have is you're expecting with a drop that everything sort of like hits you in the face. There's all the intensity of the track, but it's not that yet. So it's like, okay, what we're telling the audience, or the dance floor in this case, is, well, you thought something was going to go down, and we're building our way towards that, so we're heating things up, but we're still not quite there yet, right? So so that's what this next section is doing, is again starting to introduce little things slowly, right? So again, I think at some point we're going to also have a hi-hat come in, the filter's going to open, and then the percussion loop's going to come back in. So we've also stripped this down a lot. But so in terms of drums, pretty much everything goes down. See, a lot of stops on the kick. And the funny thing is, what that does, again, psychologically, is because there was a little stop, we just made the audience miss the kick drum for a second. Even if they're doing this subconsciously, they're like, what happened? And then the kick comes back in, and oh yeah, thank you for bringing back the kick drum. We really needed that. And so, and not only that, as we brought back the kick, we've also brought back the percussion loop, and the hi-hat gets a little bit busier. There's a little bit more of a complex pattern going on, and we're building up to what seems to be a drop, but it's not yet a drop, almost, right? But as you can see, something else is going to come up, this red track here. Let's see what that is. This is just a little thing that I've done there, which is a little chop across the whole instrumental, a little bit of a glitch, which is also a little bit weird, but I think that in a way that's just making it so we're still keeping the rhythm, so there's no changes in BPM, but that was like just for a split second there, what happened, and that is enough to keep us interested and actively involved in the progression of the beat. And notice that when I come back in, I don't come back in on the 1, which is what you'd expect for it to happen. I'm coming back on 2. Again, another reverse snare there. The same technique as before. But this is where I think we're really building up the momentum now, is with this bass coming in. It's a very rumbly bass, almost hard to tell which pitch it's associated to. But let's go back to it and see what's going on there. So, and it's interesting what this is doing. Sort of the interplay between these two, the way that they lock in is by not playing. As you can see here, the kick is here and the bass comes sort of like in the little gaps of the kick. So it's a very kind of common technique in a lot of electronic genres to do something along these lines. And if we look again back, let me just make this a little bit bigger so we can have a look at all of the things that were automated. One of the quick ways to see which parameters were automated in Ableton is everything that has a little red dot next to it. So that indicates that we have some automation going on. And as we can see, that's mostly filters at this point. We're opening up the filters. So when the drop comes in, I want it to be as sort of full spectrum as possible. And again, did a little trick here, as you're going to hear, of doing a bit of chops on the audio. This is one of the reasons why I like having things in audio rather than MIDI. Or I mean, sometimes it's just easier to do some little tweaks, and especially as far as audio editing is concerned, might help your sound design. This would be a nightmare, or be a lot harder to do in a MIDI track. So sometimes starting with MIDI, but then bouncing it down, freezing, flattening, might be something cool to explore. So here, because we're only dealing with audio, that made it a lot easier for me to achieve this effect that I'm going to show you guys now. So essentially this was dictated by something which is also popular to sort of transition into a drop, which is doing a snare roll. So I pretty much just copied and pasted the snare, which I guess originally probably was something like this. So just by duplicating that chunk there. So that would be right. We could create a little bit of a crescendo if we change the volumes of these clips. But I did it in a very sort of choppy way, which sounds a little bit gated. So it's kind of like a gating effect. But then I've decided, well, why not do that across all of the tracks? And this is like my first sort of actual drop, where everything is present, or most of the things are present, most of the things are unmuted. The only thing that I haven't muted is the hi-hat loop with it. So the hi-hat loop, what this is doing is something which is also very important in all genres of music, which is subdividing a beat, right? So essentially we have the 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we have the backbeat of the snare and the also the bass on the up. So by introducing something else that makes the subdivision even more complex, is adding to the sense of momentum of things growing, things developing, things becoming a little bit bigger, right? So I think a lot of people ask themselves, what's behind this, the science of a drop? What makes something a little bit heavier, punchier, wider? There's a lot of things that contribute to that sense of things sounding big, and I guess that this is yet another thing on a rhythmical standpoint, which is just right, because we had at the beginning we had just the. So if we just let me just put that. So right, and then kick on the 1, 2, 3, and 4, snares on the 2s and 4s, and then hi-hat's gonna make that, give that sort of 16 feel. And then there's another roll. So this is a bit more complicated because I'm starting to subdivide this further. Let me just bypass this auto filter for now. Right, so I went from just doing 2s and 4s to 1, 2, 3, 4, and then doing. So this is, and I could even go, if I wanted, on this last bit here. Should just go a little bit further zoomed in, and then do just a few more chops, and this would give me that if I wanted. But I think that was enough to just do quarter notes and then 8 notes. But then also to help with this, in order not to make it sound too. First of all, I could play around with the dynamics of this, and just if I wanted to create like a little crescendo, then I would be I could do something like this, like just join this, so Command J to join, and then eventually go into the envelopes here and play around with just a clip gain, and maybe do something. So a lot of people think, well, it's easier to do velocity with MIDI, but there's a quick way of achieving the same thing. Having the first one a little bit more intense, and then a little bit of a crescendo. But instead of doing that, I'm sort of tucking away these with a filter automation. What do you know? So as you can see here, that filter automation, the frequency is being automated in a very sort of DJ style way, I guess. And yeah, that sort of that makes then the energy breakdown. That's announcing that something is going to now become a little bit simpler. We're going to go back to something which is a little bit more textural, right? We're going to strip away the beat from all of the drums, and that will indicate that we're on a breakdown section. So pretty much everything goes away. I think the only thing we're left with is the percussion loop. However filtered it might be, so I filter that. As you can see, this was yet another thing that I've done this by hand throughout the track. The great thing about Ableton is you can even map this to a MIDI keyboard. Let's say we can reach for something like this. Let's say that we wanted to, let me just create something new here quickly. Let's grab an auto filter. This is how easy it is to MIDI map things in Ableton. So you just have to click on this little thing here, and then the parameter that you want to affect, and then you reach for, in theory, the knob. Let me just check. Well, in theory, that will that's something that might be properly set up, which I'm not going to go into. But trust me on this. This would be as easy as doing this. Just clicking there, clicking on the parameter that you want to affect, and then change that on your MIDI controller, and then that will make it even a little bit more hands-on, a little bit more tactile, a bit more fun to play around with. So let's say if you're coming from a DJ background, that would be really cool to, or more familiar to you to do it this way around. Right, moving on. Let's see. Okay, so as I said, we're pretty much left with, on this breakdown, with our main background loop with a lot more reverb on it, as I've shown in the beginning. Kick comes back in. This time around, to not use the same trick, I've automated, instead of the low cut here, I've added a second instance of an auto filter, and I've stripped down from the contents on the high part of the sound. But I have resorted again to the same trick of doing a little break there. This is also very helpful. Risers and reverse crash, reverse noise effects, something like that. I like having a little bit of either an echo or a bit of reverb on my... sometimes it's cool to just have it like that, because that sort of, again, let's just see how that might be better then. This is also cool. Actually, I think I would rather prefer to... because that kind of gives a little bit of a tail, so you have the repeats and the reverb tail kind of like dying out in a more gradual way. But at the same time, talking about tension and release, I think that could be a cool thing to have here in this particular moment. So creating something special for this moment, we could just bypass this. That's another thing that you can automate in Ableton. So it's very easy. You just click on the parameter that you want to affect, and it shows the lane that's corresponding to that parameter. So what I want to do, I could also automate the dry and wet, so the percentage of processed versus unprocessed signal, but I'm just going to mute that so it's on by default, gets this part, it's being turned off. What you have to remember is to then, because it's going to stay off, and then that would maybe affect the way that other bits are going to be processed further on. So we just want for this bit here. So that's cooler because it still has the effect, but then the effect is going to be, you know, just abruptly cut out. Yeah, cool. Okay, cool. So now, similar techniques being used here. I guess I'm going to do actually the same thing. I still want this to be off, and I liked what I did there. Or even to further exaggerate this, because there's a lot of atmospheres, there's a lot of effects, there's a lot of rumble going on. So what's something which is very musical, but we don't often consider it like so? Silence, right? Silence is also music. Remember that. In notation, you know, there's notation for silence because it's important. You gotta use it. So one of the things I like to do is, let's imagine we can grab an utility, for instance, slap that on our main, and we're going to automate the gain on that. So just for this last beat, so beat 4, right before the fake drop, and I'm going to go into that, why am I calling that fake drop. That's pretty cool as well. That's even more impactful. What that makes is, it's funny because we haven't changed anything other than introduce silence at that moment, but the fact that we've introduced silence makes the section that comes in afterwards be even more powerful, or appear to be more powerful. Let's just compare the two options. So that versus did you guys notice that? I mean, not sure if that's apparent for everyone, but I guess that really makes the next section even more impactful. So playing around with managing expectations, right? You weren't expecting that. You weren't there was a build-up of things. There was effects. There was rumble. There was everything. Everything sounded bigger and bigger. And all of a sudden, for a split second, again, silence. Absolute silence. What went on? So yeah. And I'm calling this a fake drop because it sounds like a drop because there's a lot of things coming in. There's the hi-hat. We pretty much have everything other than the bass, but then I make everything sort of go down again. So as you can see, the kick halfway through, we have 2 bars of supposedly a drop, but then so that was just a little snippet. That's me being mean. I'm just going like, okay, so you thought there was a drop there. Hold your horses. We're still gonna go for another build-up. And then here, when we do that, so let's go from the fake drop again. So we're playing with frequencies. We're playing with managing our spectrum, and that's the thing. One of the I was just discussing how the sense of things sounding bigger relates to a lot of things. The sense of width, the sense of depth, the sense of punch. But a lot of it is, when we're talking about a drop, we're essentially talking about bass, right? So bass, when the bass drops, right? That's a very common expression, right? Let the bass drop, and when the bass comes in, as powerful as possible, and that doesn't mean being louder necessarily, but what we're doing here is, again, we're taking away, right? Where people thought that was going to come in. I'm saying, well, just wait a little bit longer, right? This is a bit of crowd control here. And as you can see here, both on my bass, there's a lot of filters going on. And the rhythm is there. The pulsating bass and everything. The pulsating bass, but with no bass, right? Just the top frequencies. So as you can see, the energy is being built based on a lot of different things. So there's a few risers. This is essentially just a copy and paste of the same kick loop and the same bass loop, but the changing in the cut-off frequency is making a huge difference. Plus, see what I'm doing here with this hi-hat. Just play this against the kick. And we could even, again, we're playing with Subdivision. We're making this hi-hat more and more complex. I suppose we could even do, if we wanted, we could just grab this little chunk and do a little roll towards the end. And even, so I'm zooming in to get, as you can see here on the bottom right, depending on our zoom, we see more or fewer grid lines, so more or fewer divisions. So I'm zooming in to get a few more. So that would be one thing that I could do. Not sure if this works with the idea that I had. That could be one option, but I think I'm going to leave it as I had it before. But I just wanted to have you guys follow my drift here of what kind of made me build up this hi-hat. So the loop itself is just, again, just the backbeat hi-hats. And I think there's also, again, surprise, surprise, some filters going on there. Especially on a hi-hat, which is a sound that has mostly high, mid, and top end information. Taking away the top end makes it sort of like you can hear it in the background, you can hear that there's some rhythmic information there, but you don't really hear the hi-hat, or at least not as much as we're going to hear in the drop. So again, this is still a build-up. Another stop, another 1 bar stop on the kick. And I guess that part is pretty much self-explanatory and based on the things that we've discussed so far, right? So we're introducing more subdivision. We're introducing, filters are being opened up. We're introducing some risers. We're doing another snare roll there. And again, I'm just teasing people at this point because you thought that this was it sounded like a big drop, but it's not yet a drop because it's going to go back into a breakdown. And in this case here, sorry, let's go from here. And it really is a big breakdown in the sense that we're giving the drums a break. We're just the only thing that's left at this point is the background loops and the synths and all of that. We just this is like a proper breakdown at this point. We just want people to not dance, I guess. Just take a moment to take a breather and get ready for what's about to come down, or what's about to drop. Very gradually creeping in this little sound there. See what I did there? So this was I'm introducing, very sparsely some of the drum elements, and people then would think that when this happens, then maybe you have like one bar of a weight for the, I think if we're not looking at the screen, if we're just expecting the beat to come back in, maybe you would expect like one. Either immediately after this, right, so you're on bar 117, or more likely 118. And in this case, what happens is, but funnily enough, I think sometimes what I like to do, and this is a little bit mad, is just to, instead of having precise measurements, doing something like this. So I've just highlighted half a bar, sometimes even just like one beat, and then doing, if you right click and cut time, that will make the beat then come back in on an odd measure. So especially this would be completely like unexpected. Right, so something like that. And if you don't trust me in terms of like, how this is applied to the music that I made, I was watching a documentary, the producers from Despacito talking about how they made that song, and they did that. When the chorus comes in, Despacito, there's a little bit of, they did the opposite. They gave just a little bit of a few extra milliseconds, so you kind of expect it's interesting because instead of like you think like 1, 2, 3, 4, it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So that weight makes a huge difference, even in a very sort of like commercially successful pop song. So yeah, this just does not apply to, as I said from the beginning, this is just not in electronic music. The concept and the underlying theory can be applied to any music genre that you can think of. Right, but again, this is not yet the full drop. As you can see, I'm recycling a lot of the techniques that I've used. And again, one bar stop there. Actually, half a bar. 1, 2. And here what I did was just a different clap. I wouldn't even call it a roll, but just a chop chop, right? Which I guess, I would maybe make this even a bit more dramatic by having the synths, maybe just automate the volume here on this synth group. Yeah, well, I guess that if I were to do this properly, I would also like automate the reverb and the delay to go down. But we've done that before, so you know what I'm trying to do here. And then yes, the heavy drop where everything is coming in at the same time. And the first time that I actually introduced a new layer. So this is the only time that I'm actually bringing in something new, which funnily enough is just the same sound. So the only thing that I did here was I duplicated this, bounced in place, and then just processed it slightly differently. So this just like adds a bit of depth and some higher harmonics to make it just a little bit stronger and fuller, I suppose. And there you have it. Probably this would, at this point, maybe call for yet another drop. You know, maybe we could stretch this out to 5 minutes, I suppose, because this is again teasing people. Because you know we've been teasing people for for 4 minutes, and then we give them what a few seconds, like 14 seconds worth of drop. Maybe you know we could double this chorus towards the end. But you know, I guess it's understandable why this now would, you know, be just everything playing at the same time. So, and I guess that when I started this, if I go back to the beginning of this process, let's go back to Ableton now. What I had was I started working vertically. So this is just a little bit of a shout to last week where we just started with something which is like 8 bars or 16 bars worth, and then how we can do that. What else do we need to add? And sometimes you don't need to add. It's just managing things, and you get your structure. And you know, and if you're working on a different style, maybe you're not working with build-ups and drops and breakdowns, but you might be dealing with verses, choruses, bridges, pre-choruses, and same principles apply, right? As I said from the beginning, as I promised, this is all about some of the concepts that relate to music production in general, and when using Ableton and its built-in effects and sounds. But yeah, it's all there. Right. Before we wrap this up, we still have 10 minutes to go. There were some people that send us some tracks through, so I'm going to be analyzing one of them today. So let me just quickly, what I'm going to do here is just I'm going to group this together just to be able to mute it. And let me just bypass my mastering chain here so I can import this track from, hold on one sec, from Luis Gonçalves. So thanks, Luis, for sending this across. So I'm going to have a quick listen to this and then give you some thoughts on your production. First time that I'm listening to this, so let's see what do you have for us. Not sure if you're watching this, but if you're not, then you can always watch this back. Yeah, let's have a listen. Okay, I'm gonna just have a listen to a little bit of this track. a bit further on. Okay, cool. So there's a few things I'm gonna just, in the interest of time, I'm gonna just talk about one or two things that I've noticed that this is all subjective. It's sounding great, by the way. First thing that I will say, great sounding track. Congratulations. I think that I think that the most evident thing to my ears is the absence of a bass line. I think that there's space for a bass. There's the kick is there. Let me see if I can hear it. Because there's this wobbly sort of bass-ish sound, but not like a very sort of affirmative bass, if that makes sense. So let me see if I can quickly, just gonna jam along here. Let me grab an instrument here. Let's just see. Just gonna go for bass. Yeah, I'm thinking function over sound here. Maybe it's not the best sound possible. So this sounds like it's in F sharp. Yeah, I'm not sure if this is the best sound ever, but I think you follow my drift here. We need something that kind of So there's a lot of ways that we can navigate this. It could be sort of like longer notes. We can also do. Let me just change the sound a little bit here. Yeah, I think that would be like that. Just having something on similar to the track that I've just shown you, where we have the kick and bass kind of like locking in, and with an interplay of sort of A, B between one and the other. Or we can have like longer notes. Let me just try something else. Yeah, something darker could be cool here. Yeah, like sort of like a sine wave bass. I think that would. So for those of you who are not listening to this stream on headphones, you might have a bit of difficulty in hearing this sound. I really like dotted basses, so I think that would work well there as well. Let me just make that a little bit louder. So something along those lines. I think it's really lacking a bass line. Like a sine wave bass would be cool here. A Moog bass would be cool as well. I think it really needs that. It's just not. I think there's not enough depth as far as the low end goes, just with a kick and the wobbly sound. I will feel like that will fill up your track really nicely. And then another thing that I've noticed is the vocal itself. I think you could EQ it a little bit differently. I think there's a lot of low mids. The track still has a bit of low mids, mostly coming from the wob. So the wobble bass, I think it could come down in the mix. Like it's mostly giving us that wobbly feel, which is cool, really cool. Nothing against that. That's top notch. But I would maybe try and I'm just going to do it across the whole track, which is not the way you're supposed to do, but just to illustrate what you should do to the bass. Let me just grab EQ8 here, and I think there's an excess here around 250. Mostly on the vocal, but also a little bit on the wobble bass. I think that will. This is a kind of problematic range because there's a lot of conflict, a lot of stuff that just builds up around that when you're putting instruments together. So sometimes you got to do some decisions in as far as mixing is concerned that relate a lot of times to the low mids. It's tricky because you cannot take away too much from the low mids, and then because you then lose warmth, but you cannot also have too much of, because it makes your mixes sound muddy. So this might be a really a cool topic or a cool segue for a future episode to get a little bit into mixing, just talking about how we can embellish and how we can just calibrate our sounds from a tonal perspective, from a dynamic perspective, also creatively using effects to just make things sound good, whatever that might mean in the genre that you're working on, but using tools to get closer to some of the references that we listen to, some of our influences and our inspirations. When we listen to that track, so it sounds really polished, it's because it's been mixed really well. So I guess that a few of these things, although the balance is good in your mix, I would just address this part here. And definitely I think we need a bass line here. We need some bass to fill up it's mostly the sub part of your track. Right, so that's it for today. Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll see each other in 2 weeks' time. Till then, have fun, and let us know what you would like to see in a future episode. Take care. Cheers.